We have finally reached the end of Season 1 of Doctor Who. It's been a good run, and I'll miss Christopher Eccleston. Hello everybody, welcome to my eccentric academy. This is Tangent Studies, where there's a whole lot of tangenting and very little studying. This is a show where I pretend to be a professor when really I don't teach you, I just talk about my favorite TV shows. This episode, in a lot of ways, is sort of a product of its time. It parodies a lot of real-world game shows from the UK that I would assume are no longer on the air. But this episode also feels, in a lot of ways, more relevant than it probably did when it came out, as sort of a meta-commentary for social media, much like The Long Game. Which is appropriate because this episode, in many ways, is sort of a sequel to The Long Game. Linda, with a Y, being concerned about how the entirety of the world sees her, thus mirroring the thousands of influencers worried about how every single thing they do looks and their public persona instead of just living life. Also, I like that they return to Satellite 5 in this episode, and this episode is sort of the consequences of what happened in The Long Game. I think that's really neat. Also, it could be debated, but I feel like there's certain little things that point to the Daleks being the bad guy throughout the set of this episode. Most notably, the laser in the Big Brother house that somewhat resembles a whisk. And also a number of just circle patterns that somewhat resemble Dalek bumps. Now, all that could be just sort of coincidence or a bit of a stretch on my part. I see it because I'm looking for it. But I thought it was worth mentioning nonetheless. And it's also really interesting, the idea of these game shows killing people. And that sort of begs the question, like, would humanity actually stand for something like this going on? And it's heartbreaking with the idea of, like, what the media we consume just desensitizing people to this stuff so much. With Linda with a Y saying everyone watches this, and not understanding that the Doctor wouldn't.
And you watch this stuff?
Everyone does. How come you don't?
It makes me think of things like social media, how everyone knows that parts of it are harmful, but yet so few people are actually willing to step away from social media just because that's the entertainment that we have available. And it's like, as a society, we have to learn how to use social media responsibly before our brains just melt down and dribble out our ears and nose. And something that's kind of funny in this episode is that this is the first mention of Torchwood. And I find that funny because this episode's Bad Wolf, which, you know, Bad Wolf is the thing that shows up randomly throughout Season 1 that ends up being important for the plot. And Torchwood is that for Season 2. So they wasted no time concluding the Bad Wolf story arc before introducing the Torchwood story arc, or the Torchwood mystery, if you will. I thought that was kind of an entertaining detail. I also found this line funny in a sort of meta-commentary way.
So the population just sits there. Half the world's too fat, half the world's too thin, and you lot just watch telly.
It's too real. Also, something occurred to me when Rose mentioned the face of Bo. That's that this first season actually feels like a consistent world we have an idea how the timeline works together, at least somewhat, in this first season. Something that I think is sadly lost in later seasons. Something that I think Doctor Who sadly lost in later seasons, where the Doctor visits hundreds of possible futures, but we don't know how those futures connect. How could London be on the back of a star whale when we saw the planet Earth destroyed back in season 1 when there was no humans on Earth to turn a star whale into a spaceship? So whoever is showrunner for the next season, it would be so cool if you could draw out a consistent timeline of when things take place. But maybe I'm the only Doctor Who fan who actually wants that. I don't know. Now, this is something that I actually haven't realized before. This was pointed out to me by my brother Eric. You can check out his videos on the channel. But this episode kind of fake sets up a new companion. It introduces Linda with a Y, well, totally killing Rose Tyler. But of course that was all misdirection. Linda with a Y would be the one who ends up dying in this episode, and Rose actually ends up surviving. It's a kind of clever thing to do to guests to actually think maybe you killed their companion. But with that being said, they would never kill off Rose Tyler like this. I kind of wish the show was ballsy enough to kill off a companion in this way, but nonetheless it didn't. I like to imagine an alternate universe where Linda with a Y actually did go on to be the next companion, and that would be kind of fun. And the controller lady from this episode, I actually really like, because you can kind of look at how she's used, and you're like, oh, that's an extension of the technology used in the long game. And I think, again, it's that sort of consistent timeline details that I really like in this season. And I feel like later seasons do an okay job of it too, but never quite as good as season 1, I think. You know, it's a little disappointing to me, the part of this episode where they kill the Dalek in the Tardis, because to me it just kind of makes Daleks feel a little less scary, the way this Dalek is destroyed so easily. With that being said, it also serves as foreshadowing, as they see that Dalek has 2 eyes, because these Daleks are made out of humans, thus they have 2 eyes instead of 1 eye. That's a really cool tidbit. Now, I do think that probably it falls a little bit short, because at this point we've only ever seen one previous Dalek. So it kind of seems like some Daleks have 2 eyes and some have 1 eye. I'm pretty sure it was trying to point to Daleks being human. At least that idea has been proposed to me. And if so, that's cool, but also I wish that we would have seen more Daleks with only 1 eye to make it work. Nonetheless, it's a fun detail. This episode is also the first time I believe we really see the sort of leadership side of Captain Jack Harkness, which I think is a fun sort of character trait. You know, it's very sort of Han Solo, the sort of loner, but like he's also good with leading people and working with them. And I think that's cool. I think that's a cool part of the Jack Harkness character, is that he is a very good leader as well. And it's brilliant, the trolley problem they put the Doctor in. It's either let the Daleks go on and strive, or destroy the entire planet. And I think that's really cool and fun. I love a trolley problem, and especially in Doctor Who. It's also cool the sort of weight we see of the Doctor here, the weight of responsibility. And that's something I feel like recent seasons of Doctor Who have moved away from, is that weight of responsibility. And maybe culture as a whole has moved away from that, which I think is a negative for everyone. I think we need to embrace responsibility.
Well, what are you leaving out if you're leaving out responsibility? And the answer might be, well, maybe you're leaving out the meaning of life. That's what it looks like to me.
And I like how that weighs heavy on the Doctor. It's, very relatable to probably everyone, because we all have responsibility we wish we could just turn our back on.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times.
So, with that being said, there's this brilliant scene with Rose when she's back in the past. The Doctor takes her back to the past, and she's seen in this restaurant with Jackie and Mickey. And she just can't eat or talk about the new pizza place. She says that she can't live normally after traveling with the Doctor, after seeing what she's seen. And not because of the time travel and the different planets, but because of the way of life that the Doctor showed her, actually being around and helping people, saving the day when everyone else is running away. Now, this might sound kind of funny and perhaps a little pretentious, but I can actually really relate to Rose in this moment. There's been many sort of dark points in my life, struggling with anxiety and perhaps depression as well. And it was actually through, studying philosophy in the Bible that has kind of brought me out of those dark places. But there's been several times when it feels like people want to move me away from that sort of philosophy. They don't want me to engage with what I learned from the Bible. And it's also a really nice moment because it mirrors the brilliant moment in episode 1 where the Doctor is talking to Rose, and he sort of calls out humanity for there being a war going on among humanity, but they choose to ignore it. They choose to just eat beans on toast. And it's sort of much like the Matrix, where it's like so many people just look at you and they're like, why don't you just ignore that you're in the Matrix? Why don't you just eat your steaks and have fun?
Ignorance is bliss.
But how can you when there's actually people hurting and you know that you can help them, but yet everyone wants to turn a blind eye to it, and that really sucks. They also do a good job of back on the space station, just making it feel very helpless. Everyone's being killed by the Daleks, and they're not quite as scary as they were in the episode Dalek. I can't quite put my finger on why that is, but yeah, they don't quite work as well for some reason. But it is kind of a good sort of helpless feeling that they do a good job of presenting in the episode, if that makes sense. Oh man, this episode, the part where the Doctor says "coward any day," that is one of my favorite moments, maybe in all of Doctor Who. Just the emotion in that moment just hits me every time. And, it's like I can feel goosebumps every time Christopher Eccleston delivers that line. So yeah, I love that. I really think that Christopher Eccleston does like the emotion of the Doctor maybe better than any other actor. David Tennant does a good job too, but I think I don't feel like his I don't want to go moment hits as hard as anything from this episode. That may be a controversial take because everyone loves David Tennant, and I also love him. I actually like him better than Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, but these moments with Christopher Eccleston, particularly in this episode, just hit so hard. I like them. I like Eccleston. Now, it could be said that Rose becoming a god and just like snapping everything away is, you know, a little bit of too quick of a win. You know, it closes off the story really quick, and like a literal god from a machine, you know, Rose becomes a god by the Tardis, a machine, and she comes in to save the day. I think what makes it work, and what makes it work than maybe other episodes that have sort of a similar, and then magically the day is saved, right? Like kind of the Doctor dances has a little bit of that, and then magically the day was saved and everyone was happy. But I think where this episode works is because of the death of the Ninth Doctor. The death of the Ninth Doctor is what makes this work. You know, makes it feel like there's still consequences, and not everything is just happy and fun because, you know, they absorbed the energy from the time vortex. Someone has to die, and those are the rules, and those are good rules. And I think that's where, like, classic Russell T era does a better job than Stephen Moffat era. Is Stephen Moffat just made everything too happy and fun, and he didn't have any bittersweet moments like the death of the 10th Doctor or the 9th Doctor, you know. Like, you know, comparing it to like Matt Smith's ending felt a lot more celebrate-y. It didn't feel sad. Matt Smith's ending didn't. And Peter Capaldi, very much in the same way, didn't feel sad. It felt more of like a happy thing. Which, I guess, you know, that's somewhat good because that makes people excited to see the next Doctor, in theory. Though I'm not sure a lot of people were excited to see Matt Smith regenerate into Capaldi. He's one of the most underrated Doctors. I don't know why. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I literally have my script in front of me and I just spent a lot of time off book. So, I'm going back to the script. Don't worry. I know it's called Tangent, but, you know, I know it's called Tangent Studies, but it's best if I stay on book. I'm sure somewhere lies a script where there's a version of this where Christopher Eccleston decided to stay on. Ninth Doctor doesn't die. I feel like that wouldn't be a good episode. This episode, without the death of Christopher Eccleston, although it is a good episode, I feel like it would be ruined by keeping the Doctor alive. I'm not sure if when they wrote this episode they already knew the Doctor was gonna die. I'm sure they had something of a plan before they knew Christopher was gonna leave. But, you know, I don't know. I'm just saying this episode is really good, and it's kind of crazy that it kind of happened by accident. Also, I feel like this episode does a good job of showing regeneration to a new audience, right? And how in the Tennant era there's like a few plot lines that involve regeneration. Most notably the Meta-Crisis Doctor. You know, he's sort of made out of a previous hand and regeneration energy being sent into the hand and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know that audience would be as accepting of regeneration if they waited 2 seasons or 3 seasons to introduce it as a concept. There is one thing that kind of bothers me about regeneration moving on from this point. In this episode, it seems like the reason regeneration affected him so much was because of the time vortex energy that he absorbed. And also, like, that goes into, like, the effect with the light shooting out of him. It seems like in this episode that could be the like time energy leaving his body as he regenerates. But then they just always have every regeneration act as this regeneration did, where it's like, oh, the doctor's, you know, a little bit crazy after regeneration, or like all that. Now, I guess it is true that like previous doctors have been a little bit crazy after regeneration. Most notably when Peter Davis regenerated into Colin Baker, and in a very uncomfortable scene, he tries to strangle his companion because she's convinced he's a spy. But I think the world is a better place when we all try and forget that scene. Anyway, with that being said, I wish they would just have more consistent rules about how regeneration works, you know, and how time energy works. And maybe here's a pitch for, you know, new showrunner, if you're watching this video, here's a pitch for you. Time Lords regenerate using time energy. Like, it's all part of the same sort of thing. The Tardises work on the energy from the time vortex. So do the Time Lords. They harness that to give themselves regeneration. Actually, they pulled something out of the Timeless Child because of that story arc. Oh boy, Doctor Who has too much. Yeah, and all of this is kind of worse by, like, regeneration getting more dramatic every time. Aside from the last regeneration, or the last 2, where they tried to do weird things, you know, one of which being obviously shot last minute, and you can see that by the way it's shot, and the other one being, like, the dumb by regeneration. Oh, and it makes me so mad that Jodie Whittaker's clothes regenerated. Like, why did that happen? That makes me so mad. That's never happened. But whatever. I don't know. Again, they just need to make more consistent rules of how regeneration works so they can tell a coherent story with a coherent narrative. But Doctor Who says, no, we don't like the rules. Don't tell me what the rules are.
The rules of regeneration are known.
Did you mention the rules? Never, ever tell me the rules!
That's what Matt Smith said, and I think the showrunner said it through his mouth via that, and I'm like, but stories are better when there is consistent rules. All that being said, this here, season 1 of the revival, this is one of my favorite regeneration scenes. I love how Christopher Eccleston acts here. He's, you know, it's a sad moment for him, but he also has a good sense of humor about things. You can tell he's sort of coming to terms with it's my time to go. And, you know, it's sort of inconsistent exactly how regeneration works, but in my mind, it's more like a phoenix.
I'm gonna change you like a phoenix, then I'll raise you like a phoenix.
Where, like, the last person burns away, and then the new person stands there with all of the memories of the last person. And again, Christopher Eccleston, one of the most underrated doctors, but I have to give him my flowers for just, you know, acting his heart out in this moment. And man, he's so good. He's so good. Christopher Eccleston is a good actor. It's really a shame he hasn't been in too much more. I know, like, I've seen him in Heroes and Thor, where he plays a dark elf, but, like, I don't know, this episode is evidence that, like, he really can pull on our heartstrings. So it's a shame that he hasn't been given more opportunity to do that. Maybe he has, and I just haven't seen it. I don't know. And I honestly think the scene is one of the best written Doctor Who scenes. And it's very funny just seeing David Tennant, you know, standing there in Christopher Eccleston's outfit, especially because of, you know, how big of a part of Doctor Who David Tennant has become. You know, to this day, he still is probably mostly seen as the face of Doctor Who. What, 4 Doctors, 5 Doctors later? Whatever it's been. So it's just very funny seeing this moment and being like, this is David Tennant's first Doctor Who moment.
New teeth. That's weird.
Honestly, I think this is one of the best Doctor Who finales. Like it a whole lot. But what do you think about it? Did I say anything just wrong in this review? That's possible. I'm really, you know, I'm just talking about, I'm thinking out loud. That's what these tangent studies are about. Or is there anything that you just kind of disagree with? I love to hear all of that in the comments section. And until next time, in the words of Christopher Eccleston, have a fantastic life. Farewell, until next time. I used to do a thing where I walk off camera before I end the video, so I'm gonna do that now. See? Like this. I'm walking off the camera.